Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Thanks for Stopping By. As you all know, today is a Sunday episode, and that Sunday is for my guest interviews. And today we have a very special guest. So I'm just gonna go ahead and throw it over to you to give it your name, pronouns, and just tell us a little quick snippet about yourself.
Salutations. I am the Great Bambina, and I use she and her pronouns. And um, I used to be a baseball player, but then a ghost. I bought a cursed baseball glove, and it sent me from my time in 1944 to the present, where I am now trying to make a living as a baseball player slash baker persona.
Okay. So we're we're gonna go ahead and get into to all of that. But the first thing that I want to delve into is obviously how we met each other was through the art of pro wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
As a lot of people know, I'm a pro wrestler. And I just wanted to sort of talk about what turned you on to wrestling, because the story is so different for a lot of people. So I just kind of wanted to get what turned you on to wrestling, and were you a fan and that sort of thing.
I've always been a fan. The 40s were a pretty exciting time for women, for pro wrestling, especially women's pro wrestling, because kind of like in baseball, wrestling and other sports were experiencing a huge resurgence in like women taking the lead because most of the men were out fighting. Um, and so the 40s were this like really wild time for wrestling, and I'd always thought, I'd always wanted to do that for myself, but I just felt like I was worried that that I personally would not be allowed. Like
Right.
I was worried that as a lesbian, and as someone with a sort of atypical female body type, that I wouldn't be allowed or taken seriously. Um, but then I came to the present, and uh, anybody can be a wrestler now. Not everybody, but anybody. Um,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to phrase that too, because a lot of people, yeah, not everybody can, but any type of person can. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
real important. How has it been, sort of climbing the ranks of your wrestling career now, being a part of the LGBTQ plus community? Has it been more difficult? Have you found it, uh, specifically difficult to get booking certain places or be taken certain ways in certain areas?
I've been very fortunate in that all of the companies that I've wrestled for accepted me without what's the word I'm looking for? Without trepidation, without any sort of qualifiers. Um, I would say that really the mainly the most material way that being an LGBT person has impacted my wrestling is that I'm still struggling with this and still trying to figure out how to engage with this like internal conflict. But I feel, you always have that internalized homophobia, and that
Right.
and so it sometimes I'm not as outwardly friendly, or I guess like maybe not even friendly. I just I don't feel as comfortable in groups of other women wrestlers. I mean, I train with women, I am friends with women, I travel with other women wrestlers, but definitely, there is this internalized homophobia, this like voice in my back that says like I have to keep a certain distance from people, or else they will
Right.
think that I'm a pervert and a predator. And
Right.
there have been some cases where it has definitely, what I thought was like being polite and um, like well mannered was definitely perceived to be not. I usually change by myself.
Right.
Instead of just because in my mind I'm like, well, everybody knows that I'm queer, and I don't want anyone to think
Right.
that I am like relishing in this opportunity to be in a room full of half naked people. But when you do that,
Right.
people think you're stuck up. um, and so I do think that really one of the hardest challenges of being a pro wrestler for me is I have all these 1940s um, manners and perspectives that people really,
Right.
really don't appreciate anymore. Um,
Right.
and it's just trying to like learn, it's just trying to like learn new, this new like model, I guess, of behavior.
Right. And it is it can be challenging because you're taught pretty early from the start that there's a certain level of respect you need to have by shaking everyone's hand and sort of always being kind of in tune with your peers, but coming from someone who is also queer, it is very difficult to sometimes feel comfortable in that because you don't want people to assume things. You don't want people to, because some people get the wrong idea. When in reality, most of us are just trying to mind our own business and wrestle. So
Mm-hmm.
I can I can definitely relate to that. Um, so you've been wrestling for how long now?
I think I'm coming up on. I just came up on 1 year.
Okay. Oh wow.
February was my 1 year of like being a wrestler in front of paid audiences.
Got you. So I want to delve into that a little bit. You start training in Oakland,
I did.
with Stoner U, and
So
um,
I started
I just
training in Oakland at the Victory Warehouse, which is where the original
right.
Stoner U was. I started training with Dark Chic.
Gotcha.
She put together a mostly women's wrestling class that met once a week, and I
Gotcha.
did that every week. I didn't miss any. Yeah, it's like um, yeah, for those first 6 months, I learned a lot. Not just about wrestling. Wrestling is actually the process of training to be a wrestler has really taught me a lot about
Right.
myself, which I'll get into later. But I'll stick to this point. But like, um, so yeah, so I trained with Dark Cheek for about 6 months. There didn't seem to be. I seem to be the only new student who is interested in pursuing it like further and like trying to have a career out of it. So I ended up just I started training officially with the twins, with the Stoner brothers,
Gotcha.
and that was I want to say in April. It was in May of 2018. I remember because I messaged them on 420 to wish them a happy 420 and to say that I had the money to start training.
Right. So right. So you start training there at Stoner U. Um, kind of. I guess what I want to know is sort of you talk about learning other things about yourself through training, and I kind of want to get into that because training is so different for a lot of people in a lot of different schools. So I kind of just want to delve into your mindset about that whole process.
There are a lot of things that I didn't pursue earlier in life because um, there are a lot of things that I wanted to do with my life. Like I wanted to write songs, and I um, wanted to do a lot of like more high concept of baking. I was a music teacher for a bit, and an art
Hmm.
teacher. So I want to do a lot more of that stuff, and I didn't
Right.
pursue it as aggressively as I should because I always thought that because I wasn't good at it initially, um, that I wasn't ever going to be good at it. And, I've been basically wrestling. I've been wrestling at least once a week. I've been in a ring at least once a week since I want to say January of 2018.
Right.
I haven't taken any breaks. I haven't stopped. I usually come every day and I stay for every session, beginner and intermediate, and I'm still kind of terrible. Not, I don't suck because like I don't want to, people put a lot of work into me as a wrestler, and I want what
Right.
I do in the ring to reflect that, but there's still so much. There's still so much that I
Right.
need to learn, and I have to learn that like through community and through practice and through crashing and burning and all of these things. That's part of the
Right.
process of being good. And now that wrestling has kind of shown me the the long slog that improving
Hmm.
yourself can be, like now I'm going back and I'm trying to write songs again, and I'm baking things that are more complicated than scones, and I'm trying to do all these other things that
Right.
I wanted to do with my life, because now wrestling has kind of shown me what that looks like.
Right. And I think a lot of people too get caught up so much on training, and obviously training's really important and everyone needs to do it. But you also learn a lot in the field. You learn a lot being out there in the ring, because that's where you're going to get those off the cuff experiences that you can't in training. So I think really once your base level training's finished, where you start learning the most is being out on the road and being doing matches in places that are unfamiliar to you. Like for me, some of the places I've learned the most were up in Oregon, because I don't wrestle any of those people because they don't live down here. So
Mm-hmm.
you start wrestling and kind of pushing out of your comfort zone. um and so speaking of that, sort of wrestling, um, doing these different shows. I wanted to get your, because I asked this on my last thing too. What do you think is sort of your like dream match, like that you would want to do? As it can be anybody. Just what do you think is your idea of like a perfect match for you?
Ooh, the perfect match. I'm still so like my wrestling career is still in its infancy, and so when I think of like what a dream match would be, it would just be like, for me, a dream match would be getting to wrestle one of the people that was formative to my training, and showing
Right.
them that I've learned the things that they've taught me, and I've tried to like push myself beyond being able to do the basics. Um,
Right.
I lately have been sort of obsessed with the idea of um, wrestling a series of matches that are 9 rounds, so that they'd be like
Mm-hmm.
9 innings of a baseball game,
Right.
and like what I could do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Wrestling in rounds has been sort of out of fashion in wrestling for a few decades. Um,
Right.
and so I feel like now might be the opportunity for that to make a comeback, now that wrestling is changing, going in all these different directions now with you know recent events. I mean, it's I think it's kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Presumptuous, yes, presumptuous to think
Mm-hmm.
that, oh, okay, well, the coronavirus happened, and so now everybody's doing these cinematic matches, and that's the future of wrestling. But there have been a lot of things that we thought would be the future of wrestling, or the future of any art. Um,
Right.
as I understand it, there was a period of time where lots of artists, a lot of musicians were auto tuning their voices,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone thought that that was going to be the future of recording. Was you just show up to your studio and you sing badly, but the producer auto tunes, and that hasn't been the case. Auto tuning has as far as I understand popular music, oh man, and let me tell you, I have to tell you something about something that has really been sort of discombobulating as someone from 1944 is it's so someone a friend of mine recently gave me one of these playlists. They're called,
Yeah.
and it's a list of songs. You know what I'm talking about, and
Right.
the the title of the playlist was CVS Jams,
Uh
and
huh.
CVS is a drugstore.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think the joke behind it was like these are songs that these are very civilian songs. These are songs that you could just play
Right.
in grocery stores and not disrespect your grandmother. But
Right. Which
you
must be
know,
bizarre for you to
well,
walk into a
yeah,
grocery store and hear music.
yeah, that is, yeah. And then it's also weird that like these, these artists like Elton John or Captain and Tennille, um,
Hmm.
to someone from 1944, Hall and Oates would have practically been heavy metal. Um,
Right.
like we like in the 40s, we could not have foreseen the aggression and like sexual primacy in these songs that now the youth of today think of as like boring granddad music. Um,
Got right.
and I've been trying very hard to catch up. Catching up on 7 decades of pop culture is so difficult. That's
I
probably
would
the hard.
imagine it's very difficult to adapt from the times coming all the way from the 40s to now. I'm merely in my 20s, and I haven't really caught up with the kids today. So I could, I could only imagine. So one thing I want to talk about too. You are someone who you are very in tune with your character and personality. Uh, uh, you came from a time where you were a former baseball player and now have
Mm-hmm.
rerouted that into your style and persona.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what sort of made you want to, in a world where we can quote unquote be whoever we want to be, what sort of made you sort of want to lead towards that route of, bringing up your history into this sport? Is it comfortability or what do you think?
Spite. A lot of people don't. A lot of people when they hear about the All American Girls Professional Baseball League, um, they just think of that movie, um, and the movie gives them a very nostalgic, feel good um, sense of the past, and
Right.
that's great. It's a lovely movie. I mean, to most people, A League of Their Own is like a fun, happy period drama, but to me, it is a horror story. um,
Right.
imagine having to watch a movie of like one of the most important phases of your life, and it exists in a timeline where you never existed. Um,
Right.
yeah, uh, my therapist and I are working through it. But you see, the AAGPBL wasn't, it was a baseball league, but it was also a means of social control. Um, I talk about this fairly often, but the AAGPBL were a segregationist baseball league. They didn't allow non-whites,
Right.
and so
Hmm.
and so in a lot of ways, the AAGPBL was inadvertently or otherwise a vehicle for promoting a certain idea of American womanhood, and
Right.
that there was a whole sort of psychological culture to that. There's, if you ever go on the AAGPBL website, they have the code of conduct available for anyone to see. We were not allowed to drink, we were not allowed to smoke, we were not allowed to drive
Hmm.
our own cars past city limits without a male attendant. Um,
Right.
we were not allowed to be open about being gay or
Right.
bi or trans or there's if I was my authentic self um, in the ways that I am now, if I was that back then, I would have been kicked out of the league. Um,
Right.
and so, in a lot of ways, I wear that uniform to reclaim something. You know, I belong here and I belonged there, and you know,
Right. And I think
yeah.
that is one of the important things too. I did an episode about it, but the one of the best things about the field that we're both in now in wrestling is that even though there is still some people who are bigoted and hateful, there is a lot more places that are opening up and accepting and sort of the the wrestling is for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's an important movement because it's opening up to so many talented performers who don't fit that sort of heteronormative world that we are slowly trying to move away from,
Mm-hmm.
where that is the sort of social norm.
Yeah.
um and so going along with talking about your background in baseball, you also mentioned a sort of history with baking, and
Mm-hmm.
that leads me to you actually have a cooking show called Batter Up, which you can check
Mm-hmm.
out on Twitch. So I just want to talk about what inspired you to sort of get into that line of content, and why at this specific time.
Hmm. It's a good question. Um, you see, it's hard for me to talk about baking because a lot of people sort of see, for many people, especially in today's society, where you can just go to the grocery store and buy a bunch of prepackaged cakes and pies.
Right.
Um, many of us didn't have that option. So for me,
Mm.
baking was survival. It wasn't just a way to it wasn't just a dessert, or a fun thing you do to pass time. For me and my mother who taught me, it was, the women in our families bake because that was what our community needed from us. Um,
Right.
and, you know, um, in the 40s, I baked a lot of cakes for girls that I couldn't kiss in public. Um,
Right.
that was my way of baking a cake or baking something else. I'm actually not very into cakes. I'm not very into frosting or icing, which
Right.
is when I tell people that I'm a baker, people always want to know. They always want to ask me like, "Oh, how can I get my angel food cake or my I have this other cake that I'm working on. Do you have any advice?" And
Mm-hmm.
I try to give them the best advice I can. Um, because if you're asking somebody, oh, I need help with this project, you might have expertise, and then you as the person with that expertise be like, oh, that's stupid, I don't do those. It can be kind of
Right.
discouraging, so I try really hard not to discourage people. But um but yeah, when I baked when I baked cakes or scones or tarts or pies, that was that's that's me saying, I love you enough that I want you to thrive. I
Sort
want you
of
to
a
have.
form of affection or endearment.
I understand that. Now it would be known as mutual aid, um,
Right.
and that was really the sort of motivation behind doing this show. Is
Mm-hmm.
that a lot of my friends who are in wrestling and myself included are kind of miserable. Um, wrestling takes up so much of your time.
Yeah,
Three
absolutely.
sometimes 3 to 4 days a week of training, and then whatever shows are happening that weekend. Even if, this,
Yeah.
like, even if you are not on a show, you're still expected to go to shows if there is one in your area,
And just be there. Yeah.
to just be there. Yeah. And that involves, driving and, eating gas station food, all those things, so I think for a
Right.
lot of people, that adjustment to not having your whole week kind of eaten up by this thing that you love, you know,
Right.
there is this sort of despair. What am I going to do with myself? And so I came up with Batter Up as like a way to, you know, not necessarily just like entertain people, because I don't know if the show's entertaining, but I wanted to try and provide comfort and knowledge to people.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's I mean, I respect the shit out of that because that's sort of the same reason why I do this show. It's like I do try to entertain people and come on here and be funny, but also like the interviews are so important to me because I'm getting to reach out to a lot of really cool and talented and interesting people and sort of show them and get to talk to them and hear about their lives and sort of put them out to people that I know that may not know these people and give them that same level of comfort and learning about someone and having something interesting to turn to, and especially this time that we're in right now with the pandemic and all of that. So I can definitely respect where you're coming from with doing that. Um, one thing too I wanted to talk about is it obviously like I just mentioned, we are sort of in a pandemic. So how I guess I just want to know, like, how have you been sort of coping with that? I know a lot of people are doing different things. But how has it been affecting you in your day-to-day life?
Um, there are times when there was a couple weeks where I was convinced that I was actually dead. Um,
Right.
people have many people can't appreciate the vast, almost unquantifiable distance that exists between your time and mine.
Right.
Almost, you know, uh, we didn't even know you could land a man on the moon in 1944. I mean, we had stories and movies and all that, but we didn't really know that it would be feasible within our lifetimes.
Right.
You know, there's so many of these things that, um, people today take for granted or would have been, you know, heaven or hell for people in my time. And so
Right.
when there's a way in which I got into wrestling, and I was just so focused on doing well at that I forgot that I was alive in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I was just so committed to showing up to practice,
You sort of
get
got
good
that tunnel
gear,
vision.
go to, yeah, do this, do this, do this, and push
Right.
myself, fly to this place and wrestle a match and then fly back home and then go to one of the 2 minimum wage jobs I have to like support it. And
Right.
now that I'm not going to work and I'm not training, um, there was definitely a couple weeks where I was like, oh, maybe the glove, maybe that cursed baseball glove sent me to hell. Maybe I'm dead
Right.
and this is hell. Um, and it took me a lot of, I needed a lot of support from friends. It took a lot of love, a lot of love and
Right.
spurious nonsense hobbies to kind of get me out of that hole of disbelieving in the reality of my situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I definitely can relate to that. Especially the part where you talk about it consuming your life, where you're working two jobs. Same. I feel that, and then all the time you're not working, you're spent training and driving around to different states or flying over here or doing this and that or like we talked about earlier, even just going to shows to quote unquote show face. Um, and then when all that's sort of taken away, it does like it can start to feel like, surreal in a way. Um, one last question I want to get before we wrap up here is obviously we talked about you coming from a certain time
Mm-hmm.
that was sort of less accepting, but now being in this current time period you're in as a queer woman wrestler, I guess I just want to ask, do you have any advice for other up and coming queer or female talent that are trying to climb the ranks of the field?
I don't, because I feel like I'm the one who needs advice. Um,
Right.
I still feel like I'm finding myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's, if you watch like a lot of my earlier stuff, the one show that you and I were both on, I think, I think you caught me during my war paint phase, which is
Yeah.
which is not an appropriate term. I understand that like it can be very dismissive and disrespectful and uh, uncouth for white people to use that term. Um,
Right.
but also, when I say demon paint, people don't know what I mean. But yeah,
Right.
you caught me in that phase in my career where I was purposely trying to be ugly because I thought that's what people wanted from me.
Right.
Um, and I'm now realizing that people don't want that from me. People just want
Right.
me
Absolutely.
to feel empowered and to be myself, and I don't know what that is.
What?
Um, so I guess my advice would be, um, depending on how you view time travel, if you think of time travel as you're cut out of point A and then pasted into point B, I'm 34. If you think of
Right.
time travel as you are you are a dot that is then pushed through time linearly but faster,
Mm-hmm.
I'm 110.
Right.
So my advice would be that I'm 110 and still have insecurities about myself and how I look and how I
Right.
sound and whether or not I'm pretty or funny or cool enough to be a wrestler. And so my advice would be that that's okay for you. um, and
Right.
it's okay to like voice that. And I'm saying that because this is probably, I think, the first time that I've ever voiced this in public, that I feel like I'm
Right.
ugly and almost. And if anything, that was the one thing I was afraid that would hold me back from being a wrestler. I was afraid that I was too ugly to be a professional wrestler. Um,
Right.
so don't like hold space for that fear, you know,
Right.
but don't
Well,
let
and
it take
and
hold of you.
so
You
coming
never.
from someone who I have had those same fears, and you know coming from someone, and this is goes as well for you too, as someone who, I'm not necessarily a vet, but I've been in the business going on, I think, 5 years now. um and I had those same fears too, especially because I started discovering my transition right smack dab in the middle of my wrestling career. So I spent a lot of years not understanding why I hated the way I looked in the ring. I thought I was fat. I thought I was ugly. I thought I was gross. I thought my gear looked like shit. And I kept trying to find the reason why. What could I change? Blah blah. And really, the only real answer is to just experiment with you how you want to see yourself until you find that thing. Like I've tried stuff that looked like dog shit in the ring. I wore a dress one time and it was the ugliest dress, and it was sloppy looking, and it looked, but I tried it, didn't like it, moved on. And I actually had a moment at our most recent Vacaville show where I got my makeup done. I had new gear with the fur that I wear now, and it's like my gear template I wear now. And I just remember looking back at that footage, and I was like, that's it. That's her. Like, that's who Abigail Warren is. And, you know, it's the same thing with you where, like you said, you had the demon paint phase, and, you know, I've seen you experimenting with new boots and new, you know, knee pads and new alterations of your gear. And I think that's the only thing you can do. And then one day it'll happen where you just have that moment where it clicks and you go, yeah, that's the thing. That's the one, you know? And I could easily sit here and tell you that you're not ugly. You're very pretty. You're
Oh,
very funny.
thank
You're
you.
very interesting and cool. But at the end of the day, you know, that has to come from you as well. And that it's so hard to get over that because, you know, people are obviously people see that none of how you feel about yourself is true. But the moment where you find yourself is when you don't see it that way either, you know.
I really
But
appreciate that. Can I teach you something about the 40s?
absolutely.
We had a term. We had a phrase back in the 40s. It was killer diller. And we used to say that the way I think people in the 40s would say neato, or some
Right.
people today would say tight.
Right. Or lit,
Although
quote
I
unquote.
do understand that the word tight is already dated. I,
Right.
I, I still don't know what makes something slap or what makes something bang, and I'm probably going to die or be sent back to my own time before I ever grasp it. But anyway, if anything in the present that I have encountered warrants the phrase killer diller and all that it encompasses, you and your furry boots, like that, like that is you strike such a powerful image
Thank you.
in your gear. I've always been like I've always admired that.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate that. I definitely appreciate that. Um, and I want to say thank you so much for coming on the show,
oh,
and
thank you for having me.
teaching me some 40s lingo, and you know, letting me question you about everything. So at the end of my show, I give my guests a moment to plug their socials. I know that's probably a newer concept to you, but you know, plug any socials you have, any content you have coming up.
Okay. So my Instagram and my Twitter are both Great X Bambina. Um, on the batter up is on the Hood Slam Twitch, so it's twitch.tv/hoodslam. We are on a temporary hiatus because we are repairing some AV equipment, but we are planning to get back up soon. I think right now there are 6 episodes, possibly more on the show right now. They're also on YouTube if you go on the Hood Slam YouTube.
Okay, great.
Also, if you go on Twitch and YouTube, you can also see that I just recently wrestled the Megazord, which, as I understand it, is a famous giant robot.
Okay.
It
Okay.
was yeah. It was gave me a run for my money. It gave me a run for the 25 cents in 1944 would have been a way more money than 25 cents is now.
Right.
But yeah, check the Hood Slam Twitch and YouTube. And you, I always love seeing what people are baking. So please, if you bake anything, send me a picture. I understand some people
Yeah.
are like that about dogs. Pies are my
Yeah.
dogs, so send me your pie pictures, your sweet crust babies.
All right. Well, all of that will also be down in the link in the description below, so you guys can go check that and show Bambina some support. But thank you so
Thank you.
much. You've been such a wonder to have. Hopefully, we can all come out of this time soon, and we can finally get that match that we've been talking about for a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. Thank
Thank
you all
you.
so much for listening. Make sure to go like, subscribe, and all that stuff. And most importantly, thank you for stopping by.